What's up, guys? Welcome back to this week's episode of Close by Mo, your favorite YouTube channel for all things real estate. My name is Mohammed. I am your host, a real estate investor, and a realtor based out of the Empire State of New York. This week's episode, we're finally going to be diving a little bit deeper into how the recent interest rate hikes have actually been affecting both my buyer clients and my seller clients. So hopefully this week's episode will help you get a better understanding of what an agent understands when interest rates go up. I feel like recently over the last few months, the only thing that the news cycle has been putting out is interest rates, and inflation. So hopefully this video provides a little bit of sanity to all the noise out there. Without further ado, let's begin. Let's start talking about exactly how interest rates have been affecting what I've noticed with my buyers over the last few months. Let's go. Now, before I actually jump into some of the impacts that I've seen with the interest rate hikes on my clients that are active buyers, I want to just remind everyone that when the Federal Reserve increases interest rates, the results are pretty much exactly what they are wanting to have happen. They're wanting to have demand drop. And I'm going to link to a video here or somewhere here while I'm still trying to figure out how to get these YouTube edits done properly to the video I posted a couple of weeks ago on exactly what the logic was for the Federal Reserve to keep on increasing interest rates. Now, to jump into a little bit more about exactly how does the rising rates affect my buyers or my clients that are buyers, I think the overarching theme is it just takes a hit to their purchasing power, right? So as a buyer, when you're about to buy a house, you're obviously most likely, you're going to be using a conventional 30-year mortgage to help finance the purchase. Now, what's interesting to note is that with every 1% increase in the interest rate, your mortgage approval amount drops by about 10%, if not more, depending on which part of the country you're in. So let's say hypothetically, you had $1 million pre-approval on a Monday, and then on Wednesday, the Federal Reserve decided to increase interest rates by 1%. On Friday, when you go to get another approval, your approval amount is going to be $1 million minus about $100,000, give or take. So your approval amount is going to drop. Not only that, the second point to also keep in mind is with every interest rate hike, the amount that you pay in overall interest is also increasing, right? Now, what that means is on your monthly mortgage amount, with every 1% rate hike, your monthly payment is going to go up about another 9 to 10% or so, right? So not only is your approval amount dropping, but now your mortgage monthly payment is also increasing by about 9 to 10%, which is incredibly frustrating because it feels like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place and you're getting beaten up on both sides. The one thing that a lot of people also don't consider, and the third point that I want to make here is as interest rate hikes go up, as interest rates keep going up, the overall interest payments that you're going to be making throughout the duration of the loan also goes up. So the total amount of interest you'd be paying through the duration of the loan goes up. Now, this is something very significant because it leads me to my final point about how this affects buyers is if you're still a very motivated buyer and you still have a strong approval amount, more likely than not, as you see interest rates go up and it doesn't, sort of kick you out of your buy box or your budget, you're probably going to be thinking about, hey, I should logically start refinancing or consider to refinance this loan a few years down the line once interest rates cool down. That's a great strategy. It helps you save on the long-term duration of the 30-year loan. One thing to also consider, though, is not only will you be paying the closing costs of that loan when you first get that loan issued, but also once you start to refinance it, you're obviously going to be responsible for closing costs too. So your costs are sort of double. But it's a great way to save on the interest in the long term of the loan overall. Now let's jump into a little bit more about how the interest rate hikes also affect sellers. Even though they're not technically taking out loans, it still does affect them, and I think it's really interesting because it goes back to what I'd mentioned about the market shifting a few weeks ago. Let's jump in without further ado. Now, before I actually jump into how interest rate hikes affect sellers, one thing I always like to tell all of my clients as we start a professional relationship is every transaction is similar to any kind of market, right? To facilitate any transaction, you need more than one party on each side of the aisle. So in a real estate market, it's not just buyers, but it's also sellers. I always preface with that because I want my clients to understand that anything that overwhelmingly affects one side of the transaction still has ripple effects on the other side, right? So in this case, let's say, for example, interest rate hikes, the way they're affecting sellers is number one, home prices have started to drop very steadily. Now this of course affects a home seller because if they know that they're very motivated to sell, they now know that, hey, I'm not going to be getting top dollar for my house if I hadn't, if I list it now versus if I had listed it a year ago or even 2 years ago when interest rates were really low. So they've sort of missed that window of opportunity. Now the second thing is, because demand is now lowered, it puts buyers in a much stronger position, especially motivated buyers, because now they can put contingencies upon contingencies on their offer to protect them, right? So to give you a bit of a contrast, a year ago or even 2 years ago, sellers, because their demand was a lot higher than supply for homes, sellers were in a much favorable position and could also say, hey, your offer came in with an inspection contingency, an appraisal contingency, a mortgage contingency. I would most likely accept the offer if the inspection contingency was waived or the appraisal contingency was waived. There's a lot of waiving of contingencies that, as you know, I'm very much against, especially when I represent a buyer, because that gives more protection to the buyer. So now we're at a market where when buyers are making offers, with placing contingencies in the offer isn't a deal breaker completely for the seller anymore. Which just leads me to my third point, meaning it's no longer a seller's market. The market is shifting. I don't want to say it's completely a buyer's market yet, but I'll just go out and say, hey, I think we're about 80 or 90% of the way there already. Now, one of the fourth points that I've sort of, I almost didn't want to talk about this because I wasn't too sure, but anecdotally speaking, it makes a lot of sense, where a lot of home sellers or homeowners are finding it difficult to downsize because of the exact same reason that affects a buyer when interest rates go up. Meaning, as interest rate goes up, if a homeowner is living in, let's say, a larger home with a specific mortgage payment, which they maybe purchased with a very low interest rate a couple of years ago, now if they want to downsize and sell this house, their mortgage payment is likely going to stay the same, if not go up, if they were to downsize, assuming they kept the same, standard kind of down payment. Something very interesting to think about, I thought. With that being said, I would like to conclude the video. It's been a lot of fun, and I hope that this video is more insightful than the last couple of ones, because I try to keep things a little bit shorter. I realize, and YouTube is very helpful about this, it shows that of all the people that are watching, 60% of you aren't subscribed, so I hope you guys are subscribing. And number two, most of you stop watching after about the 2-minute mark. So I try to keep this video a little bit shorter to hopefully keep you guys more engaged. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And for now, I'll see you guys next week. Thanks so much, guys.